help us to like, comment and subscribe to the channel for more of this. Jenna, 34, had been married to Marcus for 7 years, yet she always felt like a stranger among his family. Last summer, during the annual family barbecue hosted by the Porters, she carried a fragile hope that maybe this time things would be different. As everyone gathered around the long picnic table filled with gourmet dishes, Jenna tried to share a bit about her latest graphic design project. But Marcus's sister, April, cut her off with a smirk. "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice," April said loudly. Laughter exploded around the table, Marcus included. Jenna didn't flinch. She raised her hot dog like a glass, met April's gaze directly and said coolly, "Challenge accepted." That night, while the house was quiet, she packed a small bag and left. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply walked out the front door, unsure of what came next, but certain she was done being invisible. Jenna met Marcus in their final year of university. She was a graphic design student working nights at a coffee shop to make ends meet. Marcus, with his well-ironed shirts and easy confidence, was studying business and living comfortably on his parents' support. Their first conversation sparked over a book she was reading behind the counter. He stayed after closing to keep talking. Within weeks they were inseparable. By graduation, Marcus proposed with a sparkling ring that cost more than all of Jenna's student loans combined. Swept away by love and the promise of a stable future, she said yes. When they married the following year, Jenna thought she was not just gaining a husband but a whole new family. The Porters were polished, wealthy and tightly knit, so different from the modest, hard-working home she'd come from. She hoped, maybe naively, that love would be enough to bridge the gap. The Porters were everything Jenna's family wasn't. Martin, Marcus's father, had built a thriving marketing company from the ground up. Diane, the matriarch, ran their social calendar like clockwork while sitting on multiple charity boards. April, Marcus's older sister, was already a junior exec at their father's firm by the time she turned 27. Meanwhile, Jenna grew up in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment, raised by her single mother who juggled 2 jobs. She shared a room with her younger sister, Nora, until she left for college. Holidays meant potluck dinners with neighbors and handmade decorations. The first time she visited the Porters' sprawling colonial-style home, she felt like she'd stepped into a lifestyle magazine. The differences weren't shouted, but they were everywhere. In Diane's backhanded compliments, Martin's patronizing explanations of business basics, and April's never-ending critiques disguised as help. "They mean well," Marcus would always say. "April just has a weird sense of humor." But April's humor often felt like poison wrapped in a smile. At the wedding, her toast had included stories about Marcus's ex-girlfriends and how no one could replace Vanessa, one of them. When Jenna and Marcus announced they were buying their first home, April raised a brow and said, "Is that neighborhood really up to Porter standards?" Later, when Jenna landed her biggest client yet, April had smirked and said, "They probably just hired you because of your connection to Marcus's family." Still, Jenna tried. She brought thoughtful gifts to every birthday. She volunteered at Diane's charity events, referred clients to Martin's firm, and even started dressing differently for family functions, hoping to blend in. She laughed at jokes she didn't find funny. She kept her discomfort to herself, always trying to be the perfect daughter-in-law. But deep down she knew she was constantly auditioning for a role she was never meant to get. For a while, Jenna balanced her freelance design work with family obligations. Then Marcus received an opportunity to head a new division at work. But it came with heavy travel. "Of course, Jenna will hold things down at home," Diane had said at a dinner, not even looking at her. Marcus had nodded along. No one asked Jenna what she wanted. Gradually her client list shrank. Her creative spark dimmed. Her days revolved around Marcus's schedule and the Porters' events. And when Jenna miscarried 11 weeks into a surprise pregnancy, she faced it alone. Marcus was out of town. Diane sent flowers with a note. "Perhaps it's for the best until you're more settled." April texted, blaming stress and her little design hobby. Only Nora came, holding Jenna through sleepless, tear-soaked nights. That week shattered something inside her, but she stayed. For Marcus. For appearances. Until the barbecue made her realize she had nothing left to prove. The day of the Porter family barbecue arrived with Jenna holding on to a fraying thread of hope. Maybe, she told herself, maybe this time they'd see her for who she really was. Not just Marcus's wife, but someone worth knowing. She spent hours making her late grandmother's strawberry shortcake, the one dessert that had once drawn genuine compliments from the family. Marcus was glued to work calls all morning, prepping for an upcoming business trip to Tokyo. As they rushed out the door, he barely looked at her but reminded, "Try to act impressed when Dad shows off the new smoker." Jenna nodded, smoothing the wrinkles from her sundress, a light blue one chosen to match Diane's preference for casual elegance. In her lap, she cradled the dessert container like it was a fragile part of herself. She just wanted to belong. Just once. They entered through the side gate, greeted by the buzz of catered waiters, softly playing jazz and meticulously trimmed hedges. Martin was already surrounded by admirers on the patio, proudly explaining the imported features of his new smoker. Diane floated like a social queen, laughing at all the right places. Jenna barely had time to take in the scene before April spotted them. "Marcus," April called, air-kissing her brother's cheek. Her eyes briefly landed on Jenna. "That dress is so cheerful." Jenna smiled tightly. April continued, "The kitchen's packed, but I'm sure you'll find somewhere to tuck away your dessert." Before Jenna could respond, April looped her arm through Marcus's and whisked him away into a conversation about someone they both knew from college. Jenna stood alone, strawberry shortcake in hand, with no one acknowledging her. She blinked fast, willing her composure to hold. Inside the house, Jenna found Diane in the kitchen giving precise instructions to the catering staff. "Oh, Jenna," Diane said when she finally noticed her. "You didn't need to bring anything, dear. The patisserie is handling all desserts." She motioned vaguely toward the pantry. "But how thoughtful. Maybe just place it there." Jenna walked to the pantry, squeezing her dish onto an overcrowded shelf of second-rate offerings from other guests. As she turned to leave, she overheard Diane instruct a server, "Make sure April's tiramisu is front and center." Jenna stood still for a second, her grip tightening on the doorframe. It was so casual, so dismissive. Her best effort quietly tucked out of sight like she didn't matter. But she said nothing. She walked back outside, plastering on a polite smile. She had mastered invisibility. It was practically an art now. The next couple of hours were a loop of polite conversations and false starts. Jenna tried talking to Marcus's cousins, but they were quickly pulled away by Diane to meet more relevant guests. She offered to help the staff set up the buffet but was brushed off. When she tried joining a discussion about a popular movie, her comment was talked over. Meanwhile, Marcus's brother's wife, Clara, who'd only been in the family for 2 years, was introduced with glowing praise. "Our Clara, the pediatric surgeon." Jenna watched as April included Clara in stories about vacations she'd never attended, and even Martin engaged her in deep conversation. Jenna stood by the drink table alone, observing it all. It wasn't jealousy. It was the painful confirmation that no matter how hard she tried, she would never be part of their inner circle. Not really. When it was time to eat, Marcus reappeared, sliding an arm around Jenna's back like a man doing his husbandly duty. "Having fun?" he asked with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Jenna offered a non-committal "sure," and followed him to the buffet line. They took their seats at the main patio table. Jenna found herself stuck between Marcus's hard-of-hearing uncle and an empty seat saved for April. Across from her, Marcus and Martin were deep in a discussion about Japanese etiquette. April arrived, took her seat with flair, and launched into a story about spotting a celebrity at the gym. Everyone listened intently. Even Uncle Frank perked up. Then came a lull in the conversation. Jenna saw a small opening. "I just finished a branding project for the new bakery downtown," she said. "They're launching next week." April turned eyes cool. "Is that the one with that awful neon sign?" Jenna tried to explain. "It's vintage inspired," a nod to, "If you disappeared tomorrow," April interrupted, "no one would even notice. That's how boring this is." Laughter exploded. Marcus laughed too, and something inside Jenna cracked wide open. The laughter around the table echoed like a slap. Jenna didn't flinch. Her face burned, but her voice stayed calm. She picked up her hot dog, raised it in a mock toast, and said clearly, "Challenge accepted." The table quieted just enough for the words to land. April's smirk faded ever so slightly. Marcus glanced at Jenna, confused, but said nothing. Diane chirped, "Who's ready for Martin to carve the brisket?" And the moment passed like smoke. But for Jenna, something had shifted. She spent the rest of the afternoon in quiet observation. watching how easily Marcus drifted between conversations, how naturally Clara was embraced, how her own presence barely registered unless it was to be corrected or mocked. He said little. She smiled politely. And she began making her plan. The car ride home was mostly silent. Marcus scrolled through emails on his phone, muttering about flight schedules. Jenna stared out the window, her thoughts racing. When they pulled into the driveway, Marcus finally looked over. "You've been weird since lunch." "Something wrong?" Jenna turned to him. "April's joke. Did you think that was funny?" Marcus sighed as he unbuckled. "Jenna, not this again. It was just April being April." He opened his door and stepped out, leaving her in the car. "You laughed," she said quietly, but he didn't hear. That night, Marcus fell asleep within minutes. Jenna lay awake, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding, not from anger but from clarity. It wasn't just the joke. It was the years of being diminished, ignored, minimized. She slipped out of bed at 2 a.m., walked into her home office and opened her laptop. Her search history filled with apartment listings, financial records, and one-way options to Seattle. The next morning, Marcus left for golf with his father, kissing her forehead like always, routine, distant. The moment his car pulled away, Jenna sprang into motion. She dialed a number she hadn't called in months. "Jess? I need a huge favor." Her old college roommate didn't hesitate. "Say the word. I'm leaving Marcus today. Can you come help me pack?" Jess arrived 2 hours later with takeout coffee and a trunk full of packing boxes. "You serious?" she asked, scanning the house. "Dead serious," Jenna replied. "I'm done." They worked quickly. Clothes, documents, her laptop, sentimental photos, her design equipment. Jess carefully wrapped a picture of Jenna and her mother. "You taking this one?" "Yeah," Jenna said, her voice tight. "That one comes with me." Every piece packed felt like a breath of air after being underwater too long. While Jess taped boxes, Jenna handled the logistics. She transferred exactly half of their joint savings into her personal account, not a penny more. She paid her share of the mortgage and scheduled the rest of the utilities to cancel in a week. "You're being too fair," Jess muttered. "I'm not leaving anything open to argument," Jenna replied. She packed only what mattered. Necessities, memories, her tools of independence. By late afternoon the car was loaded. Jess gave her a long, fierce hug. "You call me when you land." "Got it." Jenna nodded. She walked back inside one last time. The silence in the house was heavy, but she moved with purpose. She wrote Marcus a letter. Short, respectful, clear. She explained that she needed space, had taken only what was hers, and would not disclose her location. Then she placed her wedding ring on top of the letter and added one final piece. A printout of April's words, dated and signed. Jenna didn't cry. She didn't look back. As she pulled out of the driveway, she felt a strange mix of fear and freedom. Her phone buzzed once, then again. Marcus must have come home. She didn't answer. Instead, she crossed the state line hours later, checked into a modest motel under her own name and turned off her phone. The room wasn't fancy. Just clean sheets, quiet, and no reminders of who she had been pretending to be. She slept harder than she had in months. The next morning brought dozens of messages from Marcus. Confusion. Concern. Bigger. "Where are you? Come home so we can talk. You're being selfish. I leave for Tokyo in 3 days." But there was no mention of April. No mention of the joke. No acknowledgement of why she had left. Jenna sent one text to her mother. "I'm safe. Please respect my privacy." Then she turned off her phone again. Seattle greeted Jenna with rain. Olivia, her younger sister, had already found her a month-to-month studio apartment near the water. It was tiny, just one room with bay windows and a creaky floor, but it felt like a beginning. "The building's old," Olivia warned as she helped unload the car. "And the plumbing's weird." "It's perfect," Jenna said, placing her grandmother's shortcake dish on the kitchen counter. She unpacked her laptop and a stack of blank sketch pads. For the first time in years, everything around her was chosen by her for her. That first week, Jenna set up a new phone, opened a new bank account, forwarded her mail through Jess, and created a fresh design portfolio, carefully removing all projects linked to Marcus's family connections. Her life had officially rebooted. Marcus's messages continued, softening now. "Whatever's going on, we can work through it. You're my wife, Jenna. Please just call." Jenna stayed silent. Not to be cruel, but because she had no interest in re-explaining her worth. Meanwhile, April posted a photo of herself and Marcus at a family dinner. The caption read, "Missing no one." Jenna didn't flinch. She opened her laptop and got to work. Jess sent the rest of her things in plain boxes. Olivia dropped by with groceries and new towels. A therapist named Dr. Lewis returned her call and scheduled a first session. What Amanda said at the barbecue wasn't the cause. Dr. Lewis said in their third meeting. It was the catalyst. Exactly, Jenna agreed. The last straw. Tell me about the first one, Dr. Lewis asked gently. Jenna paused. Then the stories began to pour out. The digs. The dismissals. The silence from Marcus. It wasn't a breakdown. It was clarity. By her second month in Seattle, Jenna had 3 steady freelance clients. Small gigs like ebook layouts and Instagram templates. It wasn't thrilling work, but it paid the rent. Slowly, she felt her confidence rebuild. One rainy Tuesday, Jenna wandered into a local coffee shop for a break. A large mural caught her attention. Vibrant, layered, full of life. "That's amazing," she whispered. "The owner commissioned it," the barista explained. "She's actually looking for a designer to update our menus." Jenna's heart fluttered. Is she here? An hour later, Jenna sat across from Eleanor, the cafe's sharp-eyed owner with streaks of silver hair and no patience for fluff. "Show me what you've made for yourself," Eleanor said. "Not for clients. For you." Jenna hesitated, then pulled up a folder of forgotten personal designs. Eleanor studied them in silence. "You've been hiding," she finally said. "These are brilliant." That one meeting changed everything. Eleanor hired Jenna to redesign the cafe's entire visual identity, but under one condition. Every week bring me one personal piece. Doesn't have to be polished. It just has to be yours. Jenna nodded, stunned. For the first time in years, someone was investing in her voice. Not because she was a porter. Not because she was Marcus's wife. But because she had talent. Through Eleanor, Jenna began meeting other small business owners. More design work trickled in. Then grew. Her days became filled with color, critique, and creation. She woke up excited again. Her apartment remained small, but her world was expanding. The silence she once feared now felt like sacred space. Her past was no longer chasing her. It was simply behind her. 4 months after she left Marcus, Jenna filed for divorce. Her lawyer delivered the papers. Marcus responded with calls and voicemails, begging for a conversation she had no desire to have. Eventually his lawyer took over. Jenna didn't fight dirty. The assets were split evenly. There would be no alimony. No drama. Just an ending. When she finally checked social media again, she found Marcus smiling next to a new woman at a company function. April had posted a new caption, "Family dinners are so peaceful these days." Jenna stared at the post and felt nothing. No anger. No regret. Just peace. April had been right in a way. Jenna's disappearance hadn't made waves in the porter world. But what she hadn't counted on was that Jenna hadn't disappeared. She had simply reappeared in her own life, this time fully visible. Here is the final part of Jenna's story, paragraphs 21 to 25, concluding her emotional and empowering journey. 6 months to the day after Jenna walked away from the porter world, the divorce was finalized. Marcus signed the documents without contest. His only personal message was a short note. "I still don't understand, but I won't fight you anymore." That night, Jenna stood in front of her bathroom mirror, scissors in hand. She cut her long hair into a sleek bob, something she had always wanted but Marcus had said didn't suit her face. The reflection looking back at her was unfamiliar but strong. There were faint lines around her eyes and she was thinner from stress and change. But there was also something new. Clarity. Peace. She placed the ring box with the returned porter heirloom inside in the back of her closet and shut the door. It was no longer hers to carry. By month 8, Jenna had outgrown the tiny studio. She rented a desk in a co-working space for creatives, graphic designers, photographers, independent marketers. The place buzzed with energy, ideas, and ambition. For the first time since college, Jenna had peers who saw her as an equal. Her designs started gaining attention. First a feature in a local magazine, then a branding project for a food company that caught the eye of a national agency. The turning point came when Westwood Creative reached out with a proposal. They had seen her work on a campaign and wanted her as the lead designer for a rebranding project. The client? Sheffield Organic, a subsidiary of the Porter family's company. Jenna stared at the email for a long time. A year ago she would have said no. But this Jenna? She replied, I'd be happy to meet. The gala where Sheffield's new branding was to be unveiled was everything the Porters adored. Industry elites, velvet curtains, champagne toasts. Jenna wore a deep green jumpsuit, sharp heels and caramel highlights in her hair. She wasn't trying to make a statement. She was simply showing up as herself. The moment Richard Porter saw her, his smile flickered. Jenna, he asked. Quite a surprise. I'm the lead designer for Sheffield's rebrand, she replied calmly. Through Westwood. He blinked. I hadn't realized. She smiled politely. How you do? Later, when Marcus approached her, hands in his pockets and sorrow in his eyes, he said, You look really happy. I am, she replied. And you? He hesitated. I'm learning to be. That conversation ended with a hug that felt like the closing of a chapter. Not bitter, just final. As Marcus walked away, Jenna felt the last weight leave her shoulders. At the conference the next day, Jenna delivered her presentation with quiet authority. Her voice was steady. Her ideas were respected. Amanda approached her afterward. Pregnant now, more reserved. Your work was impressive, she said almost begrudgingly. Thank you, Jenna replied simply. They spoke briefly. No apologies, just acknowledgements. Amanda admitted, When I made that joke, I didn't think you'd actually leave. Jenna shrugged. It wasn't just the joke. It was the years before it. The joke just lit the match. Amanda nodded, looking suddenly older than her years. I don't want my kid growing up thinking they have to disappear to be noticed. Jenna smiled gently. Then that's where you start. It wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was real. Honest. And for once, Amanda didn't have the last word. A month later, Jenna sat at her kitchen table in her new home near the Seattle waterfront. A modest bungalow filled with second-hand furniture, local art and her own framed designs. As the sun dipped low over the bay, she opened her journal and wrote, The opposite of disappearing isn't being noticed. It's being fully present in your own life. She had once raised a hot dog in defiance, daring her in-laws to watch her fade. Instead she had stepped into herself, louder, clearer, bolder. The Porters hadn't noticed her absence. But she had noticed her own presence. She had left a life where she was tolerated and built one where she was celebrated. That wasn't revenge. That was freedom. And as the Seattle lights reflected off the water, Jenna smiled, not because she had proved them wrong, but because she had finally proven herself right. Moral lesson. Sometimes the most powerful response to being undervalued is not to fight for a seat at someone else's table, but to build your own. Please help us to like, comment and subscribe to the channel for